might just both introduce ourselves first. My name is Brenna Walsh. I'm originally from Dartmouth and just moved back here to the area about 2 years ago. And I'm the regional organizer for the Community Climate Hub initiative that's run by the Climate Reality Project Canada. And my colleague with that group, Ruth, and I are going to be presenting on municipal climate action tonight. Ruth, do you want to give a quick introduction?
I don't have much to add, just to say that I been working with Brenna. I see myself as her supporter rather than the main worker. And I've done a fair amount of social activism over the years, and I feel really drawn to the climate at the moment, like many of you do. The only other thing I'll add is that I'm currently living in beautiful Wolfville. And I feel very grateful. And I'm very grateful that everyone's here.
Yeah, thanks very much for joining us. I'm definitely excited to have this, give this quick presentation and then have a discussion with all of you tonight. So as I mentioned, I'm going to be talking about kind of the importance of municipal climate action and how to support climate action within your community. Come on. And so why is municipal climate action important? Currently, globally, about 55% of the population live in cities, and it's expected that by 2050, that's going to be closer to 65 to 70%. And that number is actually highest in North America. In Canada, about 80% of the population lives in cities. And though only 55% of the population live in cities currently, they produce about 70% of greenhouse gas emissions. So they're a really big center of this climate issue, but they're also a place where there's lots of opportunity for action. They can be places for flexible solutions, really place-based actions that focus on community. They're good places to have kind of pilot projects that can be scaled up or shared in different areas, as well as kind of prototypes of different types of solutions. One of the really neat things about action at the local scale is that we really view this, problem of reducing greenhouse gas emissions, reducing the number of CO2 emissions that we emit. That's a global number of CO2 emissions that we need to reduce, and that reduction kind of has this global effect that is, spread out when it's only a small reduction that you may enact locally. But there's a lot of local co-benefits that you can have that can come about from these local actions. So you can have some other kind of societal benefits that are able to kind of come into play, some economic benefits that starting up action soon can kind of bring money back to the community, as well as some really important health benefits from things like using active transport, that sort of idea, and also reducing emissions and pollutants that are contribute to global warming, but also contribute to air pollution and water pollution, as Darlene was talking about earlier. So I just wanted to first start this with kind of giving a framing of kind of points of entry for action. So if we start at the kind of global international scale, you have things like the Paris Agreement. This is obviously not an exhaustive list of points of entry, but just wanted to just kind of tack ourselves down from this global level to the municipal scale. Nationally, things that are kind of governed nationally, public property, fisheries, marine habitat, navigation and shipping emissions, toxic substance regulations, protection of Indigenous peoples and their lands, marine freshwater pollution and boundary waters, aviation, interprovincial transport, and those related emissions, as well as nuclear activity and a lot of environmental assessments. We work down to the provincial scale. A lot of business and industrial emissions are regulated provincially, mining, lumber, manufacturing, as well as municipal institutions. Institutions are kind of delegated power, so we'll get to those specifically in a minute. But then there's also some provincial scale environmental assessments, and utilities and energy grid distribution is also often regulated provincially. At the municipal scale, really points of entry that can be used and can really be of interest when thinking about how to act and contribute to this municipal action. So city planning and zoning, including green infrastructure and parks, transportation, so roads, transit, municipal fleet, public buildings and building efficiency, including heating and cooling, and then waste management and recycling are also often managed at the municipal scale, as well as zoning. And then you have these other levels that we'll get into a little bit more through this talk. But you can think about the community scale, kind of community groups, whether you're influencing your counselor or working in or participating in maybe a community garden, or that kind of personal level of consumption that can also be really important, thinking about your proximity to work and transportation's used during emissions, getting here and there and to do your groceries, etc. Thinking about reducing and reusing how much you use, and kind of extending those 3 R's past the sort of recycling, which might not be as helpful. So from that framework, I just wanted to think about some ways that we can think about cities that are currently kind of taking on this framework of action. There's a lot of sort of thought that countries aren't doing enough, and cities have been one of the entities that have stepped up to really sort of start taking action. So there's been 507 cities across Canada that have declared a climate emergency. 12 of those cities are in Atlantic Canada. As well, there's several city networks that a lot of cities around the globe participate in. The Global Covenant of Mayors for Climate and Energy is a network that really focuses on decarbonization, and cities and towns of any size across the world can be members of this network. There's more than 10,000 members globally, and they really do a lot to learn from each other. So there's 52 members, Canadian cities are members. The C40 Cities Network is another big city network. It holds 97, I believe, cities that are over 1 million people. So there's 3 of Canada's biggest cities are part of the C40, and their cities have particular commitments to certain things. One of the things being their Deadline 2020 initiative, in which all of their 97 cities were supposed to have submitted a Paris 1.5 compatible climate action plan by the year 2020. I believe that 57 of their cities managed to do that by 2020, and the others are working on it. I think there's a little leeway being given due to COVID. Within Canada, again, there's 450 municipalities participating in the Federation of Canadian Municipalities Partnership for Climate Protection program, and about 20 currently cities that have community climate hubs, which we're going to get to a little bit more in the rest of this presentation. And so I just wanted to, one of the main things that municipalities themselves kind of start doing once they've maybe declared a climate emergency or really started to prioritize climate action within their work is develop a municipal climate action plan. And good plans kind of engage different stakeholders throughout the city. And these plans develop goals and targets to reduce emissions by, say, the recent plan that was introduced by the city of Halifax this year reduces emissions by 95% by 2050. And then they have kind of actions and goals and plans for how they'll get there. One other thing that's really useful to look at when you're thinking about and diving into maybe your community's climate action plan, if they have one, is whether it's a corporate scale plan or a community scale plan. So a corporate scale plan would just look at things that are kind of owned by the municipality. So that might be municipal buildings or the municipal fleet are kind of the 2 big pieces of that. And so, but a community scale plan would kind of have all emissions within the jurisdiction of that municipality or city. And so, for example, again, from the Halifax plan that was just released, they really wanted to explicitly state that this plan was a community scale plan and noted that those corporate emissions currently actually only account for about 1% of emissions in Halifax. So really being able to expand to that community scale in Halifax certainly covers a lot more emissions and will be a lot more ambitious reductions than if this was just a corporate scale plan. So that's a good thing to look at when diving into a local plan. And so I just want to go in a little bit again. So why are these municipal climate action really important? They can be really citizen driven, especially in smaller cities. There can be a lot of influence from groups like this one, different organizations and environmental groups that work together to sort of push for different priorities and actions, you can have really place-based solutions that can then have a lot of co-benefits, deal with a lot of other social or issues that are going on within the city, and really try and kind of elevate these issues, as well as bringing solutions that can help different people throughout the society. There's this sort of flexibility, availability to have some kind of pilot projects or living labs, working with local or different academic groups can be a possibility to kind of experiment within this scale. It's a really great scale for that kind of action. And so, as I mentioned, cities have been stepping up to fill these gaps left by national government. Cities can learn from each other through this networked approach. I mentioned those city networks earlier. So that's a really good thing, good ability to be able to kind of share ideas, think about what may be applicable within another city, what has the city done to solve a certain problem, and then really think about how they can, modify that idea a little bit to work within a particular context. As well, cities can also, as well as collaborating with each other, cities can sort of push higher levels of government, provincial government, national government, to have more ambitious solutions, but also to align, if there's something that's been really working well and really starting to get established within, say, a capital city within a province, or a city that has a lot of influence, to really try and, as the province develops their own climate action plans, try and make sure that they really align and that action will really be able to complement each other within maybe funding streams or other planning processes. And so you might be wondering, so how you can get involved. So one really great way to get involved is through the Community Climate Hub initiative that was launched by the Climate Reality Project Canada in 2017. Currently there's climate hubs in about 20 cities across Canada, and hubs have an overall goal of decarbonizing, but each hub works together in its own community to kind of prioritize its actions, how this will work within the community, and how they can engage local community members as well as local governments. And hubs really try and act as a link between citizens, community members, and organizations already working on environmental and climate change issues and the local government, and really trying to form those relationships and really trying to influence council, and as well as work with city staff to try and shape solutions that really represent what the community is looking for. And so, as I mentioned, right now there are about 20 cities in Canada that have hubs. Currently, there are no formal hubs in Atlantic Canada, but one of the things that I've been trying to work on in my role as the regional organizer in Atlantic Canada is getting people interested in the hub initiative and thinking about whether there may be kind of enough interest in one place to start a hub in those cities. So one of the places that we do have a bit of a fledgling hub is in Halifax. We'll hear a little bit more about that, particularly some of the actions that they've been taking, starting to prioritize from Ruth in a few minutes. But whether or not there is a hub in your city, or there are other people that are interested in this kind of action at the municipal scale, the Community Climate Hub initiative has also developed a large variety of resources, from a different set of webinars. That would be a great complement to some of the webinars that are given by this group, I think. Packets for hosting kind of kitchen table climate conversations, different roadmaps for how to have a community consultation. So you can see from this whole list, and would be very happy to share this. It's also available on the Climate Hub website. So there's a whole list of resources that can really be used, whether or not you have a hub in your area, if you're interested in this kind of local action. I'm going to take a quick drink. I just want to highlight a couple activities of other hubs around Canada just to give an idea of what they've been doing. So in Montreal, they developed a community climate declaration, and that's been signed by more than 1,200 community members. But they also were able to work with the city to have a public consultation and bring in some people that maybe wouldn't have been kind of the, people that always are at the public consultation, not the typical actors in a public consultation, on to reimagine some of one of the neighborhoods in Lachine, and that was a really successful thing. And some of the suggestions from this consultation were taken up. The Hub in Calgary throughout COVID-19 has hosted a series of locally relevant climate webinars, sort of like the same idea that this group has been doing. They've been hosted by local stakeholders that really have a lot of things that are relevant across the country. In the Bow Valley Hub, which is a really great, inspiring small hub, they have this whole list of things that they've done. This has just been kind of like 2 months during the COVID period, so I won't read this whole list, but it's really great to see that in some small areas, there's a lot of excitement for action on climate and really bringing people together. So the first example is this presentation about economic stimulus and climate action. So that's kind of a COVID stimulus presentation given by the mayor and someone from the Pembina Institute. They were able to, instead of having these kitchen table conversations, host climate conversations in a park, which is an innovative thing to do during COVID, and have been getting together to write a lot of letters to different interest groups on different projects. So as I mentioned, in Halifax, we are starting a climate hub. And so right now we're trying to build engagement we're trying to build engagement to support decarbonization from this grassroots level in Halifax. We are definitely looking for more members to join in this effort. The climate hub structure is kind of recommended to have a little bit of a distributed leadership. The idea to have 5 or 6 people that kind of commit to forming a hub and coming together, being able to work on that for a little bit of time, and then have other broader membership that will be able to work on specific projects or activities. And so in Halifax, we have like 2 or 3 of those 5 to 6 lead members right now, and are looking to grow that kind of leadership group as well as the broader hub. And so right now, one of the main activities that we're doing is connecting with local organizations that are working kind of in the climate change, sustainability, conservation space in Halifax, and ask what they're working on, where do they see the gaps in the space, particularly that a group that wants to work on, focus on decarbonization could fill, and where they think that we could collaborate in future or support each other's efforts. And so just coming out of those conversations with individual organizations, we're going to be hosting some small roundtable discussions of 5 or 6 people in the next couple of months. So that would be something that if you are in the Halifax area, we'd really be happy to have anyone who'd be interested come and join. And we also would like to really be able to start interacting with the new Halifax City Council. We had a municipal election in the fall. I think to have a couple new councillors that are would definitely be interested in pushing forward some climate action, as well as some old allies on council. But as we're just starting out, we haven't been able to have the capacity to connect with council too much as of yet. So that's something that we're hoping to be able to start doing soon. And so we've already started, as I mentioned, some of this discussion with local groups. And in the, not quite sure what season it was at this point, 2020 was such a tough year to remember where you were during the year, but Ruth did a lot of the engagement with some groups in mid 2020. And so I'm just going to turn it over to her to talk about some emerging themes of the Halifax Hub.
Okay, thank you, Brenna. So I just want to spend a few minutes talking about the local areas of focus that we would like to pursue for the Halifax Community Climate Hub. These include Halifax 2050, organic agriculture, and environmental racism. And as Brenna said, so far these areas of focus are primarily in the Halifax region. But as new climate hubs develop, we expect to find areas of focus in other regions as well. And I'm hoping including the valley where I now live. In addition, the Halifax Hub is open to addressing other issues, but we realize we're a pretty small group and we're quite new, so we're trying very hard to focus our energy. So first, we want to focus on monitoring and responding to Halifax 2050. For those of you not from Halifax, this was the ambitious climate plan adopted by the City of Halifax last June. The plan proposes to shift Halifax to a low carbon economy and, as Brenna said, reduce emissions by 95% by 2050. The plan aims to conserve energy and increase access to clean energy sources by focusing on specific actions like retrofitting buildings and decarbonising transportation. The Halifax Community Climate Hub will try to identify gaps in this plan and work with groups like the EAC to ensure that HRM follows through with its commitments. We also plan to take on the important role of monitoring the plan. And in order to do this, the Hub will need to make contacts in City Council and also find people who have expertise in urban planning. So second, there is strong interest among our group members around organic agriculture. One of our main active members is Lil McPherson, whom many of you probably know as the founder of The Wooden Monkey, a restaurant focusing on healthy, locally sourced organic food. Lil McPherson has even become directly involved with organic agriculture herself and is campaigning to increase organic agriculture in this province. She proposes the development of organic garden plots in schools, incubator plots for immigrants and young farmers, and the construction of root cellars to store food that would otherwise be wasted. Third, the Halifax Community Climate Hub is interested in becoming allies and supporters around the issue of environmental racism. Some of you may be familiar with Dr. Ingrid Waldron, professor at Dalhousie, researcher about environmental racism, and director of the Enrich project, which stands for Environmental Noxiousness, Racial Inequities, and Community Health Project. She's best known for her 2018 book, There's Something in the Water, which explored environmental racism in Indigenous and Black communities in Nova Scotia. As you may know, the film version was directed by Elliot Page. So, the Halifax Community Hub made contact with Chaz Garraway through Dr. Waldron. Chaz is an engineering student and active member of the Enrich project, as well as a climate leader. We invited Chaz to speak about climate change as a social justice issue for the TEDx talk, which we hosted last October. We are currently looking for other ways to become allies around the issue of environmental racism. Thank you. Brenna?
Thanks very much, Ruth. So yeah, those are some of the emerging priorities that we've laid out for the Hub, and are really excited to think more about this with other members of the community. Next slide, come on. And so what's next? We'd like to open this up with some of these questions to the discussion that we're going to continue having with all of you here tonight. And so two of the main questions that we wanted to think about, in addition to obviously being open to answering any questions that you may have had about the presentation or comments you may have on the topic of thinking about this this action from the municipal scale in general, are this issue of getting in touch through the Hub with City Council, and just thinking about who may have been in touch with their councillors, or and this is not just related to Halifax, obviously across the region, what kind of experiences people have had in discussing climate issues, who might be good allies or good councillors to reach out to. And then also just also to feed through this discussion, if there are any organizations that you would suggest the Hub reaching out to kind of continue this activity of looking at what's already being done, where we can collaborate, and where there may be gaps in terms of working on decarbonization locally, just to make sure that we are aware of the local area and what's already being done. And just also of note, I'll leave this up on the screen for some of this discussion at least. Please feel free to reach out, check out the Community Climate Hub Initiative's website, which is climatehub.ca. If you're interested in joining, feel free to sign up, and you'll hear from me if you've done that. as the regional organizer from Atlantic Canada. And if you do want to reach out directly, if you have any other questions about the initiative or participating in local action, my email address is brenna@climatehub.ca, fairly easy to remember. There will also be a webinar about the Climate Hub's national and benchmarking initiative. So this is an initiative that tries to collect as much local data as possible from cities around Canada to then see how they're doing on certain indicators relating to local climate action year on year. So it will be, I believe, the third year that this National Climate League benchmarking report is being released. It's being released at the end of this month, and I'm going to be giving a webinar focused on data that's been collected from Atlantic Canadian cities on March 16th. And one other thing, if you're really excited about climate change tonight, there's also a presentation that's focusing on Atlantic Canada at 8:30 by one of the leading climate reality leaders from Atlantic Canada. I believe Carl is from New Brunswick, and I've heard he's a really great speaker and climate leader. So if you're excited about that, I do have the information about how you can join that presentation on one more slide. But I'll keep this one up here for now.
Thank you. Actually, it makes it a little more problematic for seeing people who want to speak, Brenna. Any chance that we could take it step by step without this? Yeah, great. And that's easier. Thank you. And what I always do is ask people to unmute, everybody to unmute, and then we can start a conversation and talk about the subject. And so great, people, I see people unmuting. Unless you think that there's going to be noise in the background, it'd be great if you would unmute so you can be more spontaneous about what you have to say.